Here. All right. I think we're live right now. Yep, here we go. Shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom. I'm Brother Doug, as always. With us tonight, we got Sister Sally and Sister Sadia. Sister Shoshana's on here as guest with us with her brother Dennis. We have also Sister Victoria on here as join us as a guest, and we got also Jennifer Cantago as a guest of Sadia's tonight. So we got Sister Sally, and Sister Sadia. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about the background noise. Sorry about that. Sometimes it does that stupid double playback nonsense. All right, so here we go. We are going to be going into a study called Differences in the Book of Deuteronomy. So what we're going to do here is I have a little study here on Google Docs. And so before we jump in, I kind of want to give an introduction. I would really recommend those that are new to these comparison studies. I really recommend you go on my YouTube channel. I'll leave the link in the description. Look for the playlist called Problems with the Masoretic Text. And also a really tube intro video I did a while back was what is the Septuagint, Samaritan Pentateuch, and the Aramaic Targums and the Peshitta, Aramaic Peshitta New Testament. It's about like 35, 40-minute videos, kind of like, explaining those manuscripts. Like, how you got books like Something for Dummies. It's kind of like, that was my approach with that video. So what is the Septuagint, Samaritan Pentateuch, and Peshitta New Testament for dummies, pretty much for beginners? Like, okay, what exactly are these manuscripts? And I really recommend listening to that. I'll give you a condensed version of it right now, very short, condensed. The Septuagint, originally, the original Greek manuscript was the Tanakh of the Apostles of Yahusha, written way back before Yahusha even came to earth. So basically 300 years before he came to earth to be born of a virgin, that manuscript was a translation of a much earlier, most likely original Old Testament, Paleo-Hebrew Old Testament, which we don't have today. So the reason the Septuagint is important is because it is the closest link we have to the original Tanakh, the original Old Testament. Without the Septuagint, all you have is middlemen like the Aramaic Targums, which are like mid 2nd to 4th century AD, 400 AD. Some of them are earlier. Some of them are closer to the Septuagint, like the Targum Onkelos, 35 AD to 125 AD. So the Targum Onkelos is probably the closest you're going to get to the original two from the Aramaic side. That is going to be the closest. The Old Testament in our Bibles, on the flip side, unfortunately, a lot of our Christian translators, Jewish translators for the JPS Tanakh for Judaism, they all use the rabbinical endorsed Masoretic text manuscript, which did not even exist in Messiah's time and did not even come about until pretty much 1,000 years later after Messiah left, if you really want to think about it, because 10th century AD, Messiah ascended around 32, 33 AD. That's give or take like at least a good 900 and something years later. So again, that is pretty much the base text for all your Bibles. Unless you have a Greek Orthodox Bible, unless you have certain restored name translations that actually at least consult with the Septuagint, like the RSTNE is one of them that really consults with the Septuagint, and even puts in their introduction why they favor the Septuagint over the Masoretic. So pretty much I would really recommend you watching that video. It's called What is the Septuagint, Samaritan Pentateuch, Targums, and Peshitta New Testament. So I'll put a link for that for this study that we're doing tonight. So any new people that don't know about this stuff can kind of educate themselves just by watching a very short half an hour to 40-minute video, very short. very straight to the point. So anyway, so now we got that out of the way. Now we're going to get into this stuff. Okay, so differences in the book of Deuteronomy. LXX, which is Latin for 70, Septuagint, 70 scribes. Okay, so and then you have MT for Masoretic text, the rabbinical traditional Masoretic text that Judaism uses today. So anyway, so we're going to go first to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 1. Okay, so Deuteronomy 1, verse 1. Okay, so it says here, and let me actually go to my word software. I like the word software a little bit better just because it's easier to do the comparison. It's a lot, you can actually increase the font a lot easier too. So let me do that. Let me go to, actually, I'll do share whole screen. Here we go. So Deuteronomy 1. Here we go. Command to leave Mount Horeb. Okay. These are the words which Moshe spoke to all Yisrael on this side, Jordan, or the Garden, in the desert towards the west near the Red Sea, between Paran, Tufel, Luban, Aluyan, and the gold works. So Aluyan seems to be different from the Hebrew. Did they have Hatzeroth? So Laban is the same as that, but Hatzeroth versus Aluyan. Now, again, unless we can look up the geography on this seems to be talking about two different places. I'll give the benefit of the doubt that sometimes in the Greek it has a different word for the same place. Like Mount Nebo is called something else in the in the Septuagint sometimes. So I'll give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's talking about the same place but just different names. So I'll try to give the benefit of the doubt to people. But that's the issue right there. Is there's two different places it's talking about where he's giving this speech here. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 21 will be the next one. Now, this is a big deal here. So we're going to get into this. So again, in your English Christian Bibles, Elohim would be substituted by capital G, lowercase o-d. So, like, for example, in your Christian Bibles, it would probably say the Lord thy God. Okay, so God being substituted there. In the actual Hebrew, that's Elohim. And in the Greek, that would be Theos. So just trying to explain there. And that's a whole nother can of worms to get into why they substitute Elohim for an English term God, which is not the same exact word. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But anyway, so let's see here. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 21. Okay, so for the Masoretic, by the way, I'm using an easy English Bible to understand, the ESV. So unless it improvises too much, I'll be using the ESV for the Masoretic. And Sir Lancelot Brenton's 1851 English Septuagint for the Septuagint. So let's see here, chapter 4, verse 21. So here we go, and I'll show you here. So it says right here you have Yahuwah. So all caps Lord, by the way, those that don't know, FYI. Okay, when it's all caps Lord like this in English, that's a substitution for Yahuwah in the Hebrew. So Yahuwah's name should have been carried over. Yahuwah never gave us the right to substitute his name for a title. Okay, so again, Lord is a substitution for Yahuwah. Most of your Bible prefaces actually let you know this. So some will actually say that we have chosen or opted to substitute YHWH with Lord. Okay, so this is Yahuwah right here. Now in the Septuagint, it has Yahuwah and then Elohim. So this is interesting to me. Now this is a whole nother rabbit trail. Why it only says Yahuwah in the Masoretic, but Yahuwah Elohim in the Septuagint. Many people might not know this, but Yahusha pre-incarnate, a lot of the times his name would be Yahuwah Elohim as a compound name. So pre-incarnate Yahusha was known as the commander of the heavenly army, Joshua chapter 5. That's Yahusha pre-incarnate. Yahuwah of hosts, another name for him. Yahuwah of armies. So a lot of the times where you see the Kurios and Theos coupled together, or Yahuwah and Elohim coupled together, that is pointing out that it's specifically talking about Yahusha talking, the Son talking. Okay, so to me, that's very interesting. Could be why the Masoretics took that out, was that they obviously didn't believe that Yahusha was the word of Yahuwah pre-incarnate, so they would, they don't want people to think that that's Yahusha speaking. So that could be why that was taken out there. So obviously Elohim is omitted here. So anyway, just wanted to show that. So let me see. Let's go back to the document here. The third bullet point we have is Deuteronomy 4, verse 31. And so we just did chapter 4, verse 21. This is 4, verse 31. Now, this is an interesting difference. They've actually... Yeah. So let's see here. LXX is Yahuwah. Masoretic text just puts he. For whatever reason, they changed Yahuwah to he. So now we're going to go back to the word software here and go here. So let me know, guys, if it's not going through on the shared screen. I'm trying to put the whole screen shared so I don't have to keep changing what screen I'm sharing and all that. So hopefully that's working. Here we go. So verse 31. So here it says, because Yahuwah your Elohim is a merciful Elohim, he will not forsake you nor destroy you. He will not forget the covenant of your fathers, which Yahuwah swore to them. He swore to them. So I find it weird why they would change Yahuwah to he. I just find it like really petty. Yeah, so let me explain. So basically, for those new and listening in, JC, where it says JC in your Bibles, that's supposed to say Yahusha. Where it's all caps Lord or Jehovah, or even some stupid messianic translations would put Adonai there, where the all caps Lord is even. Basically, all those in the place names that are incorrect names, where the right terms that are supposed to be there are Yahuwah for the Father and Yahusha for the Son. You can see this in Hebrews 4:9, where the translators intentionally substituted Joshua's son of Nun's name with Jesus. So they're trying to hide the fact that his name more correctly in the modern English would be Joshua, not Jesus. So in our very modern, I guess Ebonic type of English, it would be Joshua. So whenever you see this, like, perfect example, all caps, that is an indicator that that's where Yahuwah's name is supposed to be. Yep. So don't get tripped up when you're by. I know a lot of brothers and sisters that are not new and have been in here a couple of years. They say, why are you reading from an English translation rather than a Restored Name translation? I'm doing this mainly so that new people can understand what's supposed to be there in their Bibles. Plus I don't ascribe to the belief you have to use a Restored Name translation. They're not perfect either. So anyway, so moving on. So this is going to be an interesting difference here. Now, SPE, I want to explain what this acronym is. This is referring to the Samaritan Torah. The Samaritans were actually those that Yahusha spoke to, some of them. The Messiah spoke to some of them. John chapter 4. He spoke to the woman at the well. She was a Samaritan. So the Samaritans basically were, from my historical understanding, looking at Josephus's writings, who was an ancient Judean historian from the tribe of Judah, he he likened them to Ephraimites that mixed in genetically, intermarried with Gentiles. So the Samaritans were actually ethnic Israelites to a certain extent. They were actually northern house, different tribes of the northern house that were divorced. Jeremiah chapter 4, or I forget it's 3 or 4, talks about the divorce of the northern house. So the tribe of Gad, Naphtali, Asher, and all of them were divorced, and only Judah, Benjamin, and some of the Levites were left in covenant with the Almighty. So basically, the northern house, when they got dispersed among the nations, a lot of them intermarried and then came back into the land, and they started calling themselves Samaritans. So in a way, the title Samaritan was like a way to hide themselves, because in a way they're really not supposed to be in the land in a way. Okay, you're talking about people that are out of covenant with the Father. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But it's interesting to know they had their own version of the Tanakh. They had their own version of the Torah that supposedly dates back at least until 100 BC, 100 years before Messiah came to earth. So I have a little bullet point here for Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 33. These are the only two versions in this particular verse that call Yahuwah the living Elohim. To me, this is a big deal, because you see throughout the scriptures, our Heavenly Father, the Almighty Yahuwah, separates himself from these other so-called mighty ones, and he actually does call them mighty ones in a certain extent. Psalms 82, other places where it shows that there's a divine council in heaven, where it seems like these messengers, angels that either at one point were good, or they go all the way back to Satan's 1/3. These so-called lowercase gods's of the nations, Yahuwah calls angels gods's of the nations, mighty ones of the nations. So this verse here from the Samaritan Torah and the Septuagint shows that Yahuwah was making a distinction with himself, that he is the living mighty one. You might have these so-called mighty ones and these, these fallen angels and these demons and all of that want to say they're gods supposedly and want to be worshipped, but Yahuwah is the true living Elohim. So to me, this is a big deal for this to be missing in the verse. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. So this is a big deal. This is verse 33 in chapter 4. So here we go. Chapter 4, verse 33, it says, "Did any people ever hear the voice of an Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire?" A mighty one speaking out of the midst of the fire. So what? Now it's just a mighty one, just anyone, a regular angel. I think also what we have to understand too is that these Mazarites, by the way, those that don't know this, these Mazarites hated Yahusha. So in their mind, it was a regular angel speaking in the burning bush. They would never want to accept that Yahuwah would come as a messenger, as an angel himself, and speak to them. Later on, rabbis would interpret the voice speaking in the burning bush as a messenger of Yahuwah. He's not really Yahuwah. And they would somehow try to fit that into Exodus chapter 4 to where, at one point Yahuwah is talking in the burning bush, then he goes away and somehow a regular messenger is there. They probably did this on purpose, because I'm going to show you the difference with the Septuagint in this verse. It says, "If a nation has heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking to you out of the midst of the fire," there's no room for interpretation there. It's Yahuwah speaking in the midst of the fire, not some random angel speaking in the midst of the fire. So what we have to understand is why it's so much of a difference in the Masoretic text. Like I said, the Masoretic text, that manuscript is rabbinically Jewish influenced. There's rabbinic doctrine inserted into it from the actual manuscript, not from the translator, from the actual manuscript. So it originated a lot of doctrines from the Masoretic text is literally from the manuscript, is rabbinically influenced. So that's what we got to understand when we have an ESV, NLT, NIV, that they're basing their translation on this rabbinical manuscript. So that's the problem. It's not really the translator's fault. It's the fact that the source they had is not perfect. And that's the problem there. So you'll see here, the voice of the living Elohim. Now, if I go also to the Samaritan Pentateuch as a second witness here, okay, it says, did ever a people hear the voice of the living Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and lived? So what's cool about the Samaritan Torah and the Septuagint is they prove the oneness. So what you have to understand about these rabbis, especially modern rabbis, like Middle Ages rabbis and on, they did not believe Yahuwah was the messenger of Yahuwah, that Yahuwah was the angel of Yahuwah. They looked at the angel of Yahuwah like this weird Metatron character that, especially with the stupid Kabbalism and all that, they interpreted the messenger of Yahuwah as just a regular messenger, and some even thought that Enoch somehow went to heaven and became an angel. So, when you understand why these rabbis, there's a reason why these rabbis are changing verses like that. They're trying to promote like Zoharistic, Kabbalistic doctrine, pretty much. But the Septuagint doesn't, and neither does the Samaritan Torah, which both of them are almost equally 1,000 years before the Masoretic text. So again, this is why it's good to look into things like this and to test these different manuscripts, because obviously there's some things that have been changed or corrupted by the Masoretes. So anyway, let me see here. So we're going to go now to Deuteronomy 4:37. So we're going to stay in the same chapter, go to verse 37. Go back to the compare here. Okay. So chapter 4, verse 37. Here we go. Because he loved your fathers, he also chose you, their seed after them, and he brought you himself with his great strength out of Egypt. Oh boy, here we go with the Kabbalism again. It says with his own presence. Oh boy, yeah, that's the Shekinah rearing its ugly head there. But you got to understand too, again, going back to these rabbinical Talmudic rabbis, is that they believe in this weird female divine presence, and so a lot of the times they would change it to make it look like Yahuwah's not the one really doing it. He's sending Shekinah, which the Gnostics would believe in a female set-apart spirit. It's nonsense. It's rabbinic nonsense. The Septuagint shows oneness here too, because we know that in Exodus, what is it, Mom? 7, or I forget where it talks about, I will send my angel before you to survey the way, to bring you into the land. But right here it says by himself. So he's actually equating himself in the Septuagint with the angel of Yahuwah, that they're the same exact one entity, that the Father is the messenger of Yahuwah. So again, the Masoretes did not like that. They did not like that when Yahushua came to earth, born of a virgin, that he claimed to be the Father. And this is all over the Septuagint. The Septuagint clearly shows this. So these Masoretes, obviously they didn't believe he was the son of the Almighty, so why would they believe that he's one with the Almighty? So that obviously they're going to change stuff like that. So anyway, but yeah, when you see his own presence, that's that stupid Shekinah nonsense. So anyway, see here. Deuteronomy 4, verse 39. Masoretic text himself. So it says your Elohim for the Septuagint. That's not that major of a difference. That's more of like you could say second person versus third person type of speaking. Not a major difference there. Now, this is not a major difference either. I don't even know why I listed this in verse 43 of the same chapter. We have Bosor versus Beser. I mean, that's probably just a pronunciation thing or spelling thing. So I'll let that go. That's not even a huge difference. But let's go to now chapter 6 of Deuteronomy. Chapter 6, verse 3, the Masoretic text omits, and now this whole phrase here that the Septuagint has, the Masoretic doesn't have. It says, and these are the ordinances and the right rulings which Yahuwah commanded the children of Yasharal in the wilderness when they had gone forth from the land of Egypt. I find that really weird that the Masoretes left that whole paragraph out of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 3. Very weird to me. And I'll show you guys I'm not making this up. I'll put the shared screen on. I don't want you guys just blindly believing me. I'll tell you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so chapter 6, verse 3. Here we go. As you can see here, even the ESV translation is only showing about half of the verse. So half of the verse is missing. Yeah, so the ESV would even stop at flowing with milk and honey, talking about the land he brought them into. But then it misses, these are the ordinances and right rulings which Yahuwah commanded the children of Yasharal, Israel, in the wilderness when they had gone forth from the land of Egypt. So this whole paragraph after that is missing. So anyway, so I just wanted to show that. We're going to move on to verse 21. This is another thing you'll notice sometimes the Masoretic text will leave out Yahuwah's right hand or his high arm. See, the Masoretes understood who that was talking about. That's why they didn't like it. They didn't like it because they knew that it's referring to the Son, the Savior, Yahusha, before he took on flesh. That was another title for him in the Tanakh, was the right hand of the Father, his high, lofty arm. Okay, so show you guys that. All right, so let's go back to the shared screen here and go to the Word software. Okay. Now we're going to verse 21 here of chapter 6. Yeah. So right here, so it says, then shall you say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh in the land of Egypt, and Yahuwah brought us forth with a mighty hand. Now, what's weird is they leave mighty hand in this verse, but then they leave out and with a high arm. So it's almost like they want to take away from his right hand. And see, the Masoretes are not really that ignorant. They understand these. So basically, these are both of the Tanakh. These are both versions of the Tanakh, just to clarify here. So these are both Tanakh, but one was written 1,000 years after the other one. So basically is the problem we have here. By the time the version that was written that the ESV, King James, NASB, all of them are based on, you're already past the Middle Ages by that point in time. The LXX, the original LXX, which I don't even think we have today, we have a copy. We have a copy of the original Septuagint, but the original LXX was written in 300 BC, before Messiah. So that's the difference. That's the huge difference. You have the Israelites in a much more pure understanding of the scriptures, translated it into Greek, versus these way later rabbis, 1,000 years later, that are so indoctrinated with the synagogue Talmudic period that they're inserting Talmudic doctrine into the text is what they're doing. So that's the major difference. But I just want to I want to clarify, these are both Tanakh. The Septuagint is Tanakh as well. It's just it's a Greek Tanakh. That's the only difference. It's written in Greek. It's a translation of Paleo Hebrew into Koine Greek. That's That's the major difference there. So, and here's another difference here I find very interesting. A little bit of a vocabulary difference here. In chapter 6, verse 25 of Deuteronomy, it says mercy in the Septuagint, and the Masoretic text says righteousness. You're going to see a huge difference here, and kind of like some of what the circumcision party would probably believe in that Paul was dealing with. They would believe in works-based salvation and all that, and that you're declared by your own physical works of righteousness, and that rather than Yahushua's sacrifice. Okay, so here's the bigger problem here. So even from the ESV here, it says, and it shall be righteousness for us if we are careful to do all this commandment before Yahuwah Elohim as he has commanded us. So basically, in my opinion, the Masoretes are actually trying to say, well, if we do everything he tells us to do, it's our own righteousness. They're subtly trying to put a works-based belief system into their manuscript. Mm-hmm. Now, versus the Septuagint, which actually says, and there shall be mercy to us or for us if we take to heed to keep all these commands before Yahuwah Elohim as he has commanded us. Because you'll see multiple times, even Paul in his own letters, which, by the way, Paul and the apostles quoted from the Septuagint constantly, even mentioned to the circumcision party and to those believers that were fallen away to works-based salvation, saying, listen, you can't save yourself. You cannot be justified of your own works of righteousness. And Paul talks about it all the time through his letters, all the time. He was exposing the false Pharisaical rabbinical doctrine of works-based salvation, where they would do these outward works and think they're getting right with Yahuwah just by their works and no faith involved. So that's what Paul was dealing with. So, and again, you'll see, these later rabbis believe a lot what the Pharisees did. So that's what you got to realize too, is those type of people have written the Masoretic text Old Testament. So that's a big problem. Yeah. Yep, sis, exactly. So this is a major problem. Now we're starting to get into the even bigger problems here. Okay, so now they want to add in Adonai. And I don't have time to go into Adonai and all that, but safe to say, if you do your own research, and I have some links to give you guys to research it for yourselves, Adonai was most likely never originally in the Hebrew language. That was added in most likely by these Masoretes who changed the Hebrew language into a Babylonian Hebrew post the Babylonian captivity. And there's a lot of words that have been added to the language. I believe Adonai is added because if you look it up on any type of etymology dictionary, it links it to the Greek god Adonis. Literally same word, same name. So and you'll see this in prophecy. Jeremiah says, my people have forgot my name from Baal. Okay, Adonis is another Baal. Okay, so Adonai, them saying Adonai instead of pronouncing the YHUH, YHWH, however you want to pronounce the Tetragrammaton, the point is they would substitute this for this a lot of the times. And the Masoretic text actually physically started doing that, or they would add the word Adonai to the Tetragrammatons to make it say Master Yahuwah, Lord Yahuwah, or whatever. But basically that words that's being translated in English as sovereign or Lord or Master before the Tetragrammaton is not supposed to be there. It was added in there. So I'll show you what I'm talking about as we go there to this verse. So this is Deuteronomy 9. So let's go to 9, verse 26. Okay, I think we got a new guest on here. Yeah. Let's see here. So looking at LXXE on the right side here. All right, so my bad. I don't know why it did that, why it timed out like that. Okay, here we go. So the LXX would read as, and I prayed to Elohim and said, O Yahuwah, King of mighty ones, Now, this is something also the Masoretic text lacks in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 26. King of mighty ones, or you could say king of the mighty ones of the Gentiles, you could even say. Destroy not your people and your inheritance, whom you did redeem, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt with your power and with your strong hand and with your high arm. And again, you see, mighty hand is only mentioned once in the Masoretic version. Strong hand and high arm are both mentioned in the LXX version. So again, they're trying to take away from Yahusha. They're trying to make it look not that important. Oh, his arm's not that important. Don't worry about that. Don't focus on that. Let's take out strong hand out of there, or let's take out high arm out of there. So they're trying to make you not focus on that, and the fact that they don't have king of Elohim or king of mighty ones here. Okay, this is a big deal because all these other religions have tried to substitute the Father with another king of the gods, so to speak. Okay, Zeus is nothing more than replacement theology in Greek mythology for the Almighty. That's all it is. It's, they don't worship Yahuwah, so they wanted to put someone in his place, a anti-Yahuwah, you could say. So Zeus was kind of like the in place of. He was kind of like substituted Yahuwah in the Greek pantheon, because Zeus in their religion is king of the gods. Even Poseidon and Hades are below Zeus in the heavenly council. They have to answer to Zeus. So in my opinion, king of the gods or king of the mighty ones being mentioned in Deuteronomy 9:26 here in the Septuagint, it could be a way that these Hebrew scribes were trying to point to these Greeks that the Septuagint was given to, like, listen, our Elohim is the Elohim. He is the mighty one. He is the mighty one over your so-called mighty ones. He is the one that they answer to. So once you understand the pre-flood world and understand what really happened in Genesis 6 and what Psalms 82, who they're really referring to, it will make a lot more sense why he's called king of the lowercase gods's. Okay? So they're basically in scripture, there's lesser mighty ones. There's fallen entities or fallen celestial beings that the nations worship as their quote unquote gods, that the Gentiles worship as their gods. Yeah. So that's pretty big deal that title's not there. So destroy not your people. So the main thing here in verse 26 we want to take away is king of the mighty ones should be there in the text. And you shouldn't have it saying Lord or Master Yahuwah. It should just say Yahuwah. The extra Lord there is Adonai. And I'm thinking most likely it's the lowercase. Should be like lowercase Lord, or I think in my mom's NIV it would be sovereign. If it says sovereign and then it has all caps Lord, sovereign would be a nice way of translating Adonai into sovereign. Which either way, it's not in the text. Either way. So just wanted to mention that. Okay. Let me see here. So let's see here. Here's what I was mentioning earlier when we were off the record. Here's a big difference of how the scribes of the Septuagint understood Torah versus the rabbinically influenced Masoretic text, how they understood Torah. I'll show you a difference here. Deuteronomy 11:18. That's my bad. Wrong program here. Looking for the word software here. Okay, so we go to Deuteronomy 11, verse 18. So this is how the Septuagint reads. It says, you shall store these words in your heart. It's already talking about spiritually. It's talking about in your heart. You're not physically putting them on your heart. In your soul, and you shall bind them as, key phrase here, as usually indicates allegorical, metaphorical, not literal, okay, as a sign on your hand, and it shall be fixed before your eyes. Huge difference in my opinion, because I can think of setting Yahuwah's Torah before my eyes is like I'm seeing it constantly. I'm thinking about it constantly. Rather than between my eyes will be on my forehead. See the difference? There's a little subtle difference. So between your eyes, frontlets between your eyes has to do with the rabbinical tradition of they would take the Shema, put it in a little cube, strap the cube to their forehead. They do this today in Jerusalem, by the way. They put a little cube in the middle of their head on their forehead. Then they strap these straps around their arm. The leather around their arm and all that. The reason they probably do that is because they have a rabbinical understanding of that verse. They have a Talmudic understanding, a false understanding of that verse. When that verse is talking about something allegorical, not physical. So that's the problem. So a lot of things in Judaism today, they say they keep the Torah, but they're misunderstanding the Torah and they're adding to Torah by doing stuff like that. So that's a big deal. So again, most of your translations would probably say between your eyes rather than before your eyes. So a huge difference in my opinion. So let's see here. Deuteronomy 14, verse 2. So let's see how much time we got here. We got about maybe another half an hour. We'll try to get at least halfway through here. Okay, so Deuteronomy 14, verse 2, the Masoretic text omits your Elohim. And just let me know, guys, if there's any participants trying to get in, any guests trying to get in. It's going to be very hard for me to monitor that. So just let me know if I'm missing someone trying to get in. All right, so, all right, here we go. Deuteronomy 14, verse 2 says, for you are a set-apart people to Yahuwah your Elohim, and Yahuwah your Elohim has chosen you to be to himself peculiar people, to himself of all the nations on the face of the earth. So notice how it has not just Yahuwah's name, but it has the title Elohim here. The Masoretic doesn't have it a second time. The second time it just says Yahuwah has chosen you. So it leaves out your Elohim. And this is a big deal. I know people might be saying, what's the big deal? We already know he's their mighty one. Yeah, I get it. But Yahuwah also says, do not take away from my word. Do not add, do not diminish even a...
Does yours say treasured possession?
Peculiar people.
Oh, mine says ESV is treasured possession.
It says peculiar people mainly because that's where the Greek New Testament's quoting from. So when Peter talks about we are a peculiar people, he's quoting from the Septuagint. So the Septuagint originally said peculiar people. The Masoretic is kind of like paraphrasing it as treasured possession, or whatever version you have is probably just paraphrasing it. So yeah, that's probably a Masoretic thing or a paraphrasing in the English. But the literal word for word is peculiar people, which, by the way, Peter says in the New Testament. That's how we know Peter's quoting from this version of the Tanakh on the right here rather than the one on the left. So that's how we know. Just by the vocabulary there, you can figure it out. So let's see here. Deuteronomy 14, verse 16. This could be honestly a translator issue, but I've noticed that it could be a manuscript issue. The LXX says stork. So does the NIV. The NIV agrees with the LXX in verse 16 of that chapter. Masoretic text says white owl. I looked in the Strong's in the Hebrew for the modern Hebrew, the Masoretic text. For some reason, it says that it should be a white owl instead of a stork. I don't know. I don't know if that's such a huge difference, more than an interesting difference, but that's just something to take note of. That there is a different birds being mentioned in the two versions. Same thing in Deuteronomy 14, verse 17. LXX has raven. Masoretic text has pelican. Same thing in the next verse. You have Septuagint having pelican. Masoretic text has stork. Deuteronomy 14, verse 21. LXX has lamb. Masoretic text has goat. Weird differences here. All right, so let's see here. And then we got, now this is pretty interesting. We're going to look at verse 22 here, where Masoretic text seems to omit produce of your land or the fruit of your land. So we're going to look at that real quick. Verse 22. All right, so yeah, it says in the Septuagint here in Deuteronomy 14, verse 22, you shall tithe a tenth of all the produce of your seed, the fruit of your field, year by year. So for whatever reason, I don't know, I guess they feel like they don't need to put the word fruit, so it just says that comes from the field year by year. It's generalizing it. So I don't know why. I don't know, maybe the Masoretic text, the Masoretes figured that you don't need to be told that it's talking about the fruit or the ground and all that. I don't know. But I find that a little weird. So that was Deuteronomy 14, verse 22. So the Masoretic text in Deuteronomy 15, verse 1 omits your Elohim again. So we have another omission here. So now we're going to look at Deuteronomy 15, verse 1. Okay, 15, verse 1. The sabbatical year. Every 7 years you shall make a release. Okay. Wait, hold on. That can't be the right one. My bad. It should be verse 2. My bad. Not verse 1. Verse 2. This is the ordinance of the release. You shall remit every private debt which your neighbor owes you, and you shall not ask payment of it from your brother, for it has been called a release to Yahuwah your Elohim. And again, we don't have time to get into it, but this verse is literally calling your brother your neighbor. Because it says you are to remit a release to your neighbor what he owes you. Then it jumps to saying you are to not ask of it from your brother. So it's literally identifying your fellow believer as your brother, as your neighbor. So we don't have time to really get into that. We have done a study on that if you're really interested into testing what you've been taught in your background, whether that truly is what your neighbor is. I would recommend is checking out our study on the channel, Who is Our Neighbor? ? That's a great study, really recommend it. Okay, but anyway, all right, back to here. So verse 2, clearly in the Masoretic, it just says Yahuwah. Septuagint says Yahuwah your Elohim. So your Elohim again is not missing from verse 2 there of Deuteronomy 15. So very subtle differences. Very subtle differences. Most of them, if you're not paying attention when you're reading two different versions of the Old Testament, you won't even notice it. Some of these differences. Deuteronomy 15, verse 18 says, the LXX says your annual hire. Masoretic text says double hired servant. Which again, in the context, you're going to see how Masoretic text doesn't make much sense to have it saying double hired. Since the point of it is to show a household servant. A slave is treated as a household servant. And you should let him go free because basically you have not given him any pay and he's worked for you and he's worth, the regular cost of a household servant. So that's the point of the verse. So it says here, this is talking about releasing your man slaves and female slaves and all that. So it says in verse 18 of Deuteronomy 15, it shall not seem hard to you when they are sent out free from you, because Your servant has served you 6 years according to the annual hire of a hired servant. So Yahuwah your Elohim shall barak you in all things whatsoever you may do. Now, the Masoretic changes annual hire to almost double. So it says in the Masoretic, it shall not seem hard to you when you let him go free from you for a half the cost. Oh, that's even worse. The ESV says half the cost of a hired worker. He has served you 6 years. So depending on your translation, it could be even worse depending on the translation. But you see how the Septuagint makes it more clear. It's talking about the exact equal amount that you would pay a hired servant. He's basically worked for free for you, and he's earned that. But obviously, he's sold himself to you, and his pay is living with you. So you've benefited off him not paying him anything. So his pay would be the fact that you're letting him go free, if that makes any sense. So also it talks about you actually give him certain flocks and all that in the next verse. So it does require us to also give certain possessions to a slave that wants to go free in the year of release. So anyway, moving on. Deuteronomy 16, verse 7, Masoretic text omits boil. If I'm not mistaken, this is very confusing because without the word boil there in Deuteronomy 16, many of us have misunderstood this chapter to be that now the rules of the Passover have changed. You can't eat the Passover at your own home anymore, like the actual meal. You can't eat the meal at your own home anymore in your own cities. But the problem is the Masoretic text leaves out the word boil. Now, the reason this is important is that the Passover meal is not boiled. So if Deuteronomy 16 is talking about a lamb being boiled, it can't be the Passover meal. It has to be sacrifices of the week of Passover. So this key phrase being left out makes people think that you have to go to the temple to eat the Passover meal. This is a big deal. So this causes us to actually misunderstand the difference of Deuteronomy 16 and Exodus 12. And they're talking about two different contexts. So without the word boil there, you could make the assumption, oh, well, this is talking about the Passover meal. So that's the big problem there. So the fact that it says some translations will just say cook it, even worse. Like how? Because in Exodus 12 it says you're only supposed to roast it. So very weird. So the fact that it says you shall roast and boil it, meaning like roast or boil it, that's obviously talking about the sacrifices of the night of Passover or the week of Passover. Later on, when they got into the land, Yahuwah added sacrifices for the festival of Passover and unleavened bread, where you would have to sacrifice sheep and oxen. And if I'm not mistaken, in this chapter as well, in the Masoretic text, it doesn't let you know it's talking about sheep and oxen. It'll just say from the herd, like what from the herd. That a lot of big differences in Deuteronomy chapter 16. That's why I say leaving out words like that can definitely lead to a misunderstanding of that verse. So now we're going to look at Deuteronomy 16, verse 21, where the Septuagint makes it clear it's not just talking about worship. It's talking about even for decoration. You never put the evergreen tree by the altar of Yahuwah. You never do it. And I know many of us have grown up in that tradition where people will put even regular plants or regular trees, not just talking about Christmas trees, but regular plants and trees literally right on the altar or next to the altar. So it's too bad we didn't have the Septuagint growing up. But anyway, so let me see here. Forbidden forms of worship. You shall not plant for yourself a grove. You shall not plant for yourself any tree near the altar of your Elohim. Now, the Masoretic makes it look like it's only talking about Asherah poles in worship, because it will say, you shall not plant any tree as an Asherah beside the altar of Yahuwah your Elohim that you shall make. So, unfortunately, the way the Masoretic has it worded in these modern translations of the Masoretic, it makes you think that Yahuwah is only talking about the purpose of worship, not to put a tree near the altar. So that's the problem I have with that version of the verse there. It doesn't make any sense. it leaves out an important context that in general, Yahuwah does not want us to put trees near his altar. So regardless for worship or not for worship. So that, anyway, so going down to Deuteronomy 21:29, Masoretic text adds guilt and omits your Elohim. So now we're going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 29. Okay, so we're only going to probably go for another couple more cross references here. It's going to get late on our side. Deuteronomy 21. Now, did I say 21:19, right? Or
I thought you said 29, 21, 29.
Oh, my bad. I probably meant to say 21 verse 9. My bad.
19?
Yeah. I think I meant to say 21 verse 9, probably.
9.
Yeah. Yeah. You shall purge, you shall take away the innocent blood from among you if you do that which is tube and pleasing before Yahuwah your Elohim. So your Elohim, again, missing. And then you have guilt. The Masoretes add the word guilt there. And to me, it doesn't even make sense to have to add the word guilt in there. It's already talking about shedding innocent blood. I mean, that's guilt of itself. That's, so I don't understand the need to add the word guilt in there. So that's kind of redundant, in my opinion. Let's see here. So 21 verse 9, just did that. Deuteronomy 24 verse 1. Now, this is going to be part of another study we're going to do sometime in the future, but this is a big deal because this leads people to think that Yahushua is talking about divorce in Matthew 5 because of the way the Masoretes have chosen a different word to use for the reason you are allowed to divorce a woman. I'm also going to show a cross-reference here that would agree over the Septuagint rendering versus the Masoretic text from both versions of Deuteronomy 21. So just bear with me. I'm going to show you guys the problem here of how the Masoretic has it. Because it's going to create a contradiction within the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, so if you go here, Deuteronomy 24 verse 1. In the Septuagint, it says, if anyone should take a wife and should dwell with her, that it should come to pass if she should not have found favor before him, because he has found something unbecoming thing of her. So again, unbecoming, if you look into the Greek word there, unbecoming is not limiting it to fornication. It does not limit it to fornication. Unbecoming could be not submitting to her husband. Unbecoming could be being disrespectful. Unbecoming could be that she's not being a real wife in Yahuwah. Okay, so there's many ways that she can be unbecoming. It's not limited to uncleanness. Okay, so this is the problem with the Masoretic text. It limits it to uncleanness. When if you look at the actual word in the Greek, it's clearly talking about, generally speaking, unbecoming, that he's allowed to divorce her. And it says, then he shall write for her a bill of divorcement and give it into her hands, and he shall send away her out of his house. Go ahead, Brother Joshua.
Can you expound on that a little more? Because I'm not sure how it doesn't tie into something sexual, because it seems that the word means like nakedness or shame.
Not in the Thayers. If you look at all the definitions it gives, it's multiple ways that word can be used. And if you look at the context of Deuteronomy 21, it would actually contradict with Deuteronomy 21 to limit it to uncleanness. So I'll show you that in a minute, but that would not make any sense. To only limit it to uncleanness would actually contradict with the other law that is related to this law. So see here, it says here, indecent thing. Okay. One of the definitions even means that she's not being elegant. Okay. Elegant has nothing to do with sexual morality. Deformed, indecent, unseemly. That doesn't mean it's sexual. Unseemly there's multiple ways someone can be unseemly. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you look at the actual definitions of it, shapeless has nothing to do with fornication. Figuratively, inelegant, uncomely. That even could mean that he hasn't found favor in her attractiveness in a way. Okay, so if we actually look at all the definitions of that word, it's very clear that it's not limited to uncleanness. It's the Septuagint does not limit it to uncleanness. Let me clarify myself. The Masoretic text does. So that's the difference. And that's why people confuse, in my opinion, they confuse divorce for put away is the main reason why. Because we're working with a rabbinically influenced version of Tanakh that decides to make divorce the only way you can divorce her is if she cheated on you, basically. Because even in the Masoretic ESV, they translate it as indecency because the Hebrew word does mean indecent, but the Greek word doesn't. So, yeah. No, it's okay, bro. It's okay. I'm just trying to show people why there's a huge difference when you look at the two texts of Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. And this is why we have such a misunderstanding of put away versus divorce. This is one of the reasons. But I'll go into the cross-reference I have for this to show second witness here in both texts that Yahuwah even gives you for female slaves. You can divorce them just because you don't have favor. You don't favor them anymore. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 10 to 14. I'll show you guys both versions that pretty much they agree. Both Septuagint and Masoretic agree in this. Okay, so 21, verses 10 to 14. The usage of a captive taken a wife. And if when you go out to war against your enemies, and Yahuwah your Elohim shall deliver them into your hands, you shall take their spoil, and you should see the spoil a woman beautiful in countenance, and should desire her, and take her to yourself for a wife. So showing that it's righteous to actually, be attracted to a woman. The attraction is not the sin. The sin is actually, actually desiring to do something in your heart with someone else's woman or a woman in general before you're married. So that the desire is the actual thought of sex before marriage. So there is a difference. But anyway, and should bring her within your house, then you shall have shaved her head, pare her nails, and shall take away her garments of captivity from off her. She shall abide in your house. She shall bewail her father and mother the days of a month. Again, there we go. Only a month. And afterwards you shall go into her and dwell with her. She shall be your wife. And if it shall be, if you do not delight in her, meaning you're just not happy with her, you shall send her out free. She shall not by any means be sold for money. You shall not treat her contemptuously because you have humbled her. So again, it's basically showing here in verse 14, you can divorce a woman lawfully, righteously, just for she doesn't please you anymore. Just, she's fallen out of favor. So again, this is showing that the Masoretic version of Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 creates a contradiction within its own book. So again, when Yahushua is talking about for the sake of fornication, he's talking about sending your wife away for a time to basically not be under your covering. She's still the guy's wife. So if she marries another man when she's put away, she commits adultery because she's still married. So anyway, we're going to do a future study about that to unpack that. I know there's a lot of misconceptions about that in the church. They try to say if you remarry when you're divorced, you're sinning. It's a whole big false misconception there. But anyway, so moving on here, I want to move on to Deuteronomy 24, verse 13. Again, mercy for the Septuagint, righteousness for the Masoretic text. So we'll see what the context is here. So this is Deuteronomy 23:14. Okay, so see here. Because Yahuwah your Elohim walks in the camp to deliver you and give up your enemy before your face, and your camp shall be set apart. There shall not appear in you a disgraceful thing, and he shall turn away from you. Okay, maybe that was the wrong verse there. Possibly the wrong verse. Oh, my bad. 24:13. Whoops, wrong chapter. It's my bad. It says 24 verse 13. Okay, that's all right. So let me move this up. Let's see here. Here we go. You shall surely restore his pledge at sunset, and he shall sleep in his garment, and he shall barak you, and it shall be mercy to you before Yahuwah your Elohim. And now here we have it's saying it's righteousness before you. Now the problem again, and this could be just me, maybe I'm misunderstanding what the Masoretic is saying, but it seems like it's promoting works-based type of belief system, that you in your own workings you're earning righteousness. You know what I'm saying? Rather than we follow Yahuwah's Torah and he makes us righteous. There's like a little subtle difference. And if you really think about it, say like you return back to him, you repent from a sin that you felt from the other day, you missed the mark. He's obviously giving you mercy or favor by repenting and returning back to him, rather than your own works are adding righteousness to you, you know. So I definitely go with the Septuagint version of Deuteronomy 24 verse 13. It says mercy instead of righteousness. So I definitely agree with that. I think Paul would agree with that. All the apostles would agree with that. So there's definitely some rabbinical stuff you got to watch out for in the Masoretic text. There's definitely a lot of stuff you got to watch out for. This I thought was very interesting. Deuteronomy 28 verse 58. Okay, so Deuteronomy 28 verse 58. Okay. All right, so it says, if you will hearken to do all the words of this law, which have been written in this book, to fear this esteemed and wonderful name, Yahuwah your Elohim. Now, I like the fact that the ESV is trying to fix this verse, at least. They're trying to use the Septuagint here, because if you look at the Masoretic, it says, I think, fearful name, and I get what it's trying to say with fearful, but if the original word is wonderful, leave it as wonderful. Like, you know, I don't know. I think sometimes they try to put some weird demiurge idea in the Masoretic text, where they try to make people have the wrong type of fear for Yahuwah, where like it's like a tyrant type of fear. I don't know. It's very weird to me. So it's weird that they put terrible there or fearful instead of esteemed and wondrous, you know, like you see in the ESV and the Septuagint. So I find it very strange that the Masoretes put like terrible sometimes when it says wonderful, esteemed. Very weird to me. See here. I guess we'll finish off these cross references here, and then we'll call it a night. We'll probably leave it, Yahuwah willing, at Deuteronomy 31:15. So the next one we got is Deuteronomy 29 verse 4. Yahuwah in the Masoretic, Yahuwah Elohim in the Septuagint. Again, we already went over this earlier, so I don't want to rehash something we already went over. When it's Yahuwah Elohim, it's referring to Yahusha. So I'm not surprised that the Masoretes would want to leave out Eluah or Elohim following Yahuwah, because they don't want any idea of a pre-incarnate word of Yahuwah being one with the Father and all that. They don't believe in that, so I'm not surprised. Deuteronomy 29 verse 7, the LXX lacks, and we smote them. So we're going to look at Deuteronomy 29:27 here. My bad, not 27. Deuteronomy 29, verse 7. Deuteronomy 29, verse 7. And okay. All right, so it says here, and you came as far as this place, and there came forth Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, to meet us in war. So I'm trying to see here. Okay, but we defeated them. It's not there. Okay, I see that. All right. Yeah. So I mean, you could kind of take either side of the argument. You could be pro-Masoretic and say that maybe the Septuagint left it out, but it's like, why would they need to? Why would Masha or Joshua or whoever's writing this book? Why would they need to iterate? We defeated them when we know they defeated them in other places. So go ahead, Brother Joshua.
The LXX does have we defeated them, it just words it differently. It's in verse 8, and we smote them.
Ah. So yeah, that's the translator adding it to the next verse. Okay, yeah, that happens a lot. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. English translators have their own traditions where they think what sentence belongs in what verse and all this nonsense. So yeah, that's part of the problem. Thank you, Brother Joshua. Okay, so we can move on. Deuteronomy 29:19. LXX says flatter. Masoretic text says barak, which, by the way, is the actual correct word for bless. So I find it interesting that there's an exact word that can be transliterated into the English as barak. That is the right word for bless, yet these translators don't do it. So I find that interesting. So, by the way, the word bless, actually, if you look at its etymology, unfortunately, bless is a word that goes back to the pagan idea of bloodletting people. So, yeah, bless is not supposed to be there in the text. It's supposed to say barak. I'll show you the difference here, why one is talking about baruching Abba or baruching one another versus cursing. It says here in Septuagint, Deuteronomy 29, verse 19, and it shall be, if one shall hear the words of this curse, and shall flatter himself in his heart, saying, let tube happen to me, for I will walk in the error of my heart, lest the sinner destroy the guiltless with him. Now, what's weird for Barak being there in verse 19 in the Masoretic is, first of all, if he's saying that in his heart, he's not Baraking himself. He would be cursing himself. Because basically what he's doing is he's doing willful sin, and he's actually promising himself he's going to do willful sin. So that in essence, you are cursing yourself. So I would definitely go with the Septuagint version of that. And I'll give you an example, an extra canonical example of that. The Book of Enoch. They cursed themselves. They did not barak themselves. It wasn't a baraka that they promised to do what they were going to do. So that's a perfect example how the Septuagint even agrees with Enoch. So again, with the vocabulary and all that. So very weird for the Masoretes to include barak in that verse. But moving on here. Deuteronomy 29, verse 20. LXX has Alim. Masoretic text has Yahuwah. This is like a rarity that I would agree with the Masoretic text. I think every other version has Yahuwah in that verse. So that's the one rarity. Deuteronomy 30, verse 3, LXX lacks your Elohim. Again, another rarity there. Usually that doesn't happen. Okay, Deuteronomy 30, verse 4, Masoretic text lacks Yahuwah, your Elohim. And we've seen that about 4 times already. The Masoretic text in the book of Deuteronomy lacks your Elohim. So this time it's lacking Yahuwah as well. So Deuteronomy 30, verse 6, LXX lacks your Elohim. Deuteronomy 30, verse 8, Masoretic text lacks your Elohim. Deuteronomy 30, verse 9, Masoretic text lacks your Elohim. So we've already looked about 6-7 times it's lacking your Elohim in the Masoretic text. Deuteronomy 31, verse 11, The LXX has Yahuwah. Masoretic text, again, has just he. So, again, making it general. Deuteronomy 31, verse 15, Masoretic text omits by the door, talking about by the door of the tabernacle. So I find that a little weird because it's talking about Yahuwah appearing in the cloud to talk to Moshe and Yahushua, son of Nun. So the Masoretic text leaves out that he appeared in the cloud by the door of the tabernacle. So very strange. So I think we're going to end tonight in this part of the study because it's getting kind of late and I don't want it to get all the way into the morning for us on the East Coast here. So it's about 11:30 p.m. right now for us on the Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to end here, and this will be part one of the difference in the book of Deuteronomy. So I would recommend people, again, if this is new to them, again, please watch that video I mentioned earlier about what these different manuscripts are. It's a really good crash course, only 40 minutes long. I really recommend it just to kind of give yourself a better idea why there's so many differences here. So if you enjoyed studies like this and watching us do these types of studies, I recommend subscribing to the channel, click the notification bell so you get notified whenever we do a study. And to our brothers and sisters out there, have a great rest of your Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. And see you next time.
Shabbat Shalom, Biko.
Shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Bye.